In this video, I'll be repotting and doing some heavy root work on my Trident Maple that I've had for about 15 years. I have a lot of sentimental attachment to this tree, so it's worth the efforts. But if you get to the point where you're doing this type of root work, a lot of mistakes have been made. But bonsai is often a microcosm for life, and sometimes all there is to do is to acknowledge your mistakes and try to correct them and move forward, which is what I'm trying to do here. This tree's been in its grow box for about 2 years, so it's necessary to cut the roots on the side walls as they are penetrating all the crevices of the box, and it would be impossible to remove it without cutting them first. I should have warmed up better for this one. This tree and one of my other earlier works are the ones that made me decide to not make material so big anymore. As I work on getting this tree out of its pot, you can see that it has a really nice basal flare and nice taper through the trunk. This is from years of ground growing in my parents' backyard from when I lived in Texas. At the time, I didn't know the importance of lifting trees every year that are being ground grown and trimming the roots so that you get a nice root spread. Since starting this tree, I've learned that I don't really like ground growing for how I approach bonsai. But nevertheless, it's what I did at the time on this tree, and it has left me the nice basal flare and good taper in the lower and mid trunk. So the work that I'm doing for this repot is all about preserving those things that I gained through ground growing, preserving my basal flare and my taper in the lower and mid trunk for this tree. But at the same time, I need to correct the things that through my poor execution of ground growing this tree lacks, which is radial roots. It's worth mentioning that without caring about the basal flare and the lower trunk taper that I've gained in this tree from years of ground growing, it would be way easier and way more expedient to just air layer or ground layer the bottom part of the trunk. But I would lose a lot of height and I would lose the flare that I did gain through all those years. With deciduous bonsai, it's really important that you keep in mind that you want to progress the design of the tree throughout the years. You want to keep building on what you've done, even if what you did wasn't perfect. You really have to play to win with deciduous bonsai, or you won't get anything done. When you're doing any root work that will have the roots exposed to the air for an extended period of time, it's a really good idea to wrap them in a damp towel just to avoid desiccation. And also, it's a good idea to disinfect your tools before use. Now I'm working on removing any roots that are growing downward with my saw. And in the case of this tree, it's requiring multiple cuts for the same root because maples tend to readily fuse roots when they're in contact, and that's what's happening in this case. Later in this repot, I'm going to apply a treatment to those downward facing scars I've created with my saw, which will hopefully encourage the formation of roots. And this will help create a radial root spread. And now I'm girdling the large roots on the tree. These roots were manifested from the tree's ground growing days, and they're really what give the tree its basal flare. The girdling of these roots is being executed by cutting a ring all the way around the whole root so that it cuts through the cambium, and you're really removing the whole phloem. By doing this, you're eliminating the tree's ability to send sugars that are made in the leaves down to the roots, but you're preserving the tree's ability to send water from the roots to the leaves. You can see I've girdled the roots along the same plane so that hopefully a radial root system will emerge from each of the roots that occupies the same plane as its neighbor root. Additionally, you can see here that I'm removing extra wood from the roots to ensure that I've gotten all of the cambium off. Trident maples are really known for their ability to aggressively bridge cambium gaps when you do things like trying to air layer them. So I put these zip ties on as a way to kind of act as a speed bump. I'm not really sure how it'll work, but I thought it's worth a try and a good experiment. You can see that on the opposite side of the tree from the roots that I've girdled that there are still some large roots that are growing down that I haven't cut yet or girdled. And I did that on purpose because I want to preserve some strength in this tree because it is a bit of an older tree at this point and it grows a bit slower, so it will be nice to have some extra force behind its recovery. And I'll address those roots next year or the year after. And now I'm applying a solution of Dip and Grow, which is indole 3-butyric acid, or IBA, to the root girdles and the downward wounds that I made by removing those downward growing roots. As far as girdling the roots like this goes, that technique is somewhat established. However, the technique of cutting the downward growing roots almost completely at the base of the trunk, I'm not sure how that's going to play out. So it'll be a bit of an experiment, but it's always good to experiment in bonsai and learn how you can progress your trees. And now I am placing long fibered sphagnum moss around the root girdles and underneath the downward facing wounds that I created from removing those downward growing roots. And this isn't a necessary step, but long fibered sphagnum moss does have some antifungal properties, which is the main reason I'm putting the moss here. I really look forward to sharing the results of this work with you in 2024. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing to my YouTube channel and following my Instagram account. Both are at Hardy Bonsai. And I really hope you do well this year and your bonsai do as well. Thank you. Bye.